You know how some families have that one relative no one really talks about? That one person whose name comes up at the dinner table only to be quickly brushed aside, replaced with nervous glances and forced smiles? Well, for Jenna, that person was her Aunt Margaret. She was told growing up that Margaret just left, packed her bags in 1987 and vanished without a trace. No calls, no postcards, no explanation. Just gone. But what if I told you that for nearly 4 decades, the truth about what happened to Aunt Margaret was right under the family's nose, hidden behind a wall no one ever thought to question? What if I told you that everything started unraveling because of a garage sale, a rusty key, and a door that was never supposed to be opened? Before we go any further, I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself this. If someone close to you disappeared without warning, no note, no goodbye, what would you do? Would you keep searching, or would you eventually let it go, tell yourself it was their choice and move on? Now imagine if one day, decades later, something happens that makes you question everything you thought was true. That's exactly what happened to Jenna. And trust me when I say, the twists in this story, they don't just keep coming, they hit hard. You are going to get the answers you came for. Every single one. So stay with me, because this isn't just about a missing aunt. It's about secrets, betrayal, and a discovery so chilling, it will change how you look at old family homes forever. Now, I know there are 1,000 videos fighting for your attention right now, but I promise you, this one is different. I'm not going to waste your time with filler or drawn-out suspense. From this moment on, we're diving straight into a mystery that was hidden in plain sight for over 35 years. If you're someone who loves true crime, lost person cases, or real-life mysteries that seem too wild to be true, you're in exactly the right place. We're not here to speculate. We're here to uncover. And I'm going to walk you through every jaw-dropping detail, every emotional turn, and every eerie clue that led to a door that should have never been found. Because once that secret room was opened, everything changed, not just for Jenna, but for her entire family, and possibly for yours too. Let me take you into Jenna's world. She was an average woman, mid-30s, lived in upstate New York, worked as a nurse, and had always been quietly curious about her family's past. But like many of us, she didn't go digging unless there was a reason to. Life kept her busy, and memories of Aunt Margaret were hazy at best, just a name on old photographs, a whisper during tense conversations. Jenna's mother never talked about her sister. All Jenna knew was that Margaret disappeared in 1987, around the time Jenna was born. It was like a line had been drawn in the sand, and no one ever dared cross it. Until one day, that line was shattered by something as ordinary as an estate sale. When Jenna's grandmother passed away, the family gathered to clean out the old Victorian house Margaret and her sisters had grown up in. It was one of those big, drafty homes you see in small towns, creaky floors, chipped wallpaper, and a basement that gave you chills just walking past it. The family decided to hold an estate sale to clear out decades of belongings. As they sorted through antiques, dusty boxes, and yellowing books, something odd happened. An older man, a complete stranger, showed up at the sale and asked about the door. Jenna thought he meant the garage. But when she asked which door, he leaned in and whispered, "The one she built. The one behind the wall." Those words hit Jenna like a punch to the gut. The one she built.
Who was he talking about?
And what wall? Before she could press for more, the man walked away and disappeared into the street like a ghost. No one else saw him. No one else heard the words. But for Jenna, that moment changed everything. It planted a seed in her mind that refused to die. And when the rest of the family left, when the house was finally empty and silent, she went back alone, determined to find out if there was more to that house than anyone had ever let on. And that's where this story really begins. Not with Margaret's disappearance, not with family gossip, but with a woman who refuses to accept that some questions are better left unanswered. The moment Jenna starts pulling at that thread, what she finds doesn't just shake the family's history, it rips it wide open. Because hidden behind an old bookshelf, concealed by decades of paint and plaster, is a door that shouldn't exist. A room no one knew about. A room that had been locked from the inside. And what was inside that room? That's where the story turns from tragic to chilling. That's the moment you'll remember long after this video ends. Right now, I want you to think about your own home, or maybe your parents' home, or your grandparents'. How many corners, crawl spaces, or old trunks have you never looked into? How many things have you assumed were just part of the house, never questioning what might be behind them? Sometimes, the most terrifying secrets are hiding in the places we feel safest. And sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones hiding them. This story will take us into that kind of territory where the walls can talk if you're willing to listen. As we unravel what really happened in 1987, you're going to meet people who knew more than they ever let on. You'll hear from neighbors who stayed quiet for decades, family members who swore they had nothing to do with it, and investigators who hit dead ends at every turn. You'll discover how a single Polaroid photo, found in a stack of old mail, led Jenna to suspect that Margaret never actually left. That maybe, just maybe, she never had a chance to. And you'll see how the truth was hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to open a door that had been sealed shut with more than just nails. So buckle up, because we're about to go on a journey that takes us deep into one family's darkest secret, a secret that begins with a disappearance and ends with a revelation no one could have predicted. And remember, this isn't just a mystery. It's a warning. Because if something like this could happen in Jenna's family, it could happen in yours too. It could be happening right now, behind a wall no one's bothered to question. Now stay with me, because in the next part of the story, we step inside that hidden room for the first time in 38 years. And what Jenna finds there is something no one was prepared for. Jenna hadn't been back to her grandmother's house in years, not since the last Thanksgiving when the entire family had managed to be under one roof without breaking into shouting matches or silent, passive-aggressive stares. Life had a way of pushing people apart, especially in families with long shadows and unspoken history. Since then, Jenna's life had moved on, or so she thought. She was working night shifts at the hospital in Rochester, trying to balance her sanity with 12-hour days and the emotional exhaustion that came from caring for people at their worst. Her relationship with her boyfriend, Kyle, was hanging by a thread, strained by conflicting schedules and Jenna's growing sense that something inside her was pulling in a direction she couldn't name yet. That pull had started subtly after her grandmother's death. A nagging feeling. A kind of emotional static buzzing in the back of her mind every time she thought about the house, the attic, the long hallway with the floral wallpaper that curled at the edges like dried skin. She hadn't even liked the place as a kid. But after that stranger mentioned the door, she couldn't stop thinking about it. It started with dreams. Vague at first, Margaret's face blurred by time and imagination, standing at the foot of the staircase, trying to speak but making no sound. Then came the dreams where Jenna herself was inside the house, moving through it in slow motion, opening doors that creaked open into blackness. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, convinced she'd seen something she shouldn't have. Kyle brushed it off as stress, told her she needed to unplug, maybe take a few days off and get away. But Jenna couldn't. She found herself scrolling through old family photos on her phone, zooming in on the ones with Aunt Margaret. There were only a few, each one showing a slim woman with shoulder-length dark hair and an expression Jenna couldn't quite read. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was almost like Margaret knew something no one else did. That's when Jenna started digging. Not just emotionally, but physically, searching through her grandmother's things under the guise of helping with the estate sale. Her Uncle Paul had inherited the house, but he didn't care much about what was inside. He lived in Florida and was only too happy to let Jenna manage the sale and clear things out. That gave her full access to every room, every closet, every drawer. She started noticing strange things, tiny inconsistencies that felt like more than coincidence. The living room floor plan had a bizarre asymmetry, like there was too much space on one side of the house that wasn't accounted for in the layout. The basement had a cold draft, but no visible vent or window. And then there was the crawl space in the attic, sealed shut with rusted nails that didn't match the rest of the house's hardware. Still, none of it was proof. And every time she tried to bring it up to her mom or her cousin Riley, they'd shut her down gently but firmly. Let it go. her mom would say, her voice tight. Your Aunt Margaret made her choice. But that was the thing. Jenna didn't think she did. The more she dug, the more she realized that the story the family had always told, the one about Margaret falling out with her sisters and leaving to find herself, was built on paper-thin memories and secondhand rumors. No one could remember where she was last seen. No one could recall exactly when they last talked to her. There was no record of her ever buying a bus ticket, no rental car receipts, no forwarding address. It was like she vanished before anyone really started asking questions. The only person who seemed open to talking was Mrs. Redmond, the neighbor who'd lived next door for over 40 years. Jenna found her trimming her rose bushes one afternoon and struck up a conversation that led, slowly, to a chilling admission. Margaret didn't just leave, Mrs. Redmond had whispered, glancing back toward the house. I heard something that night. A scream.
Late.
I thought it was just a fight. They always fought in that house. But when Jenna asked her to explain, the old woman clammed up, suddenly unsure if she should have said anything at all. People think they want to know the truth, she added. But once you do, you can't unknow it. That sentence lodged itself deep in Jenna's brain, echoing louder every time she walked past the narrow upstairs hallway where the shadows always seemed a little too dark. The strange part was how everyone acted like Margaret never existed. Not out of spite, but almost like it was easier to believe she had evaporated than confront the idea that something might have happened to her inside that very house. Jenna's uncle dismissed her questions as conspiratorial nonsense. Her mother deflected every inquiry with a wounded expression and a change of subject. Even her grandmother's will, oddly tidy and practical, made no mention of Margaret at all, not even a sentimental token or heirloom. That absence felt like a message all on its own. And yet, Jenna found one photo, a single photo, tucked inside an envelope marked 1987 in her grandmother's filing cabinet. It showed Margaret in the backyard, standing near the lilac bushes, holding what looked like a piece of paper in one hand and a small brass key in the other. The date scribbled on the back was April 12, 1987, the last day anyone had allegedly seen her. That key, or one just like it, turned up 3 days later inside an old jewelry box Jenna found at the bottom of a dresser drawer in the master bedroom. It had no tag, no markings, just a smooth, worn surface that felt too heavy to be meaningless. At first, she thought it might be for an old trunk or maybe a safe. But when she took it down to the basement and started poking around, she noticed something odd. The back wall, lined with crumbling shelves and covered with dusty paint cans, sounded hollow in one section. Different. She knocked once, then twice. A third time, and something shifted behind it. Her heart racing, Jenna pushed on the panel and felt it give, just slightly, like something had been loosened over time, but never meant to be opened. She didn't go further that night. The fear wasn't logical, it was bone deep, like some part of her brain had sensed danger long before she consciously did. She left the basement and locked up the house. But that moment marked a shift. She started keeping a journal, started recording every strange detail, every odd memory, every inconsistency in the family's version of events. She couldn't help but notice how her mother's mood changed whenever the house came up, or how her cousin Riley avoided eye contact whenever she mentioned Margaret. At first, Jenna thought maybe they were just hiding something embarrassing, some family shame they didn't want aired. But it felt darker than that.
Deeper.
Like they were afraid of something. And then, just as Jenna was starting to gather the courage to break through that wall, Kyle surprised her with a weekend visit. They hadn't spoken much in the past week, but he said he was worried. Said he missed her. Said she seemed obsessed lately, and that he didn't like the way this house was making her act. But there was something in his tone, something defensive, that made her pause. Kyle had never even met Margaret. He barely knew anything about her. Yet the way he talked, it was like he knew more than he should have. When Jenna pressed him, he got flustered, changed the subject, said she needed to stop looking for ghosts. But Jenna had already passed the point of no return. Something was hiding in that house, something big. And Kyle's sudden visit wasn't helping. In fact, it made her question whether someone had tipped him off. Whether someone in the family, maybe even her own mother, had told him to check on her, to stop her. That's when Jenna began to see patterns. Names repeated in old letters. Receipts for materials that didn't match any visible renovations. And a single journal entry from her grandmother's datebook, dated just 2 days after Margaret vanished. It read, "Room sealed. Must never be opened." At that point, Jenna knew. The key she found wasn't just symbolic. It was literal. There was a secret room. And someone, maybe multiple people, had worked very hard to make sure it stayed hidden. What they were hiding, though, was still just out of reach. But with that wall now exposed, and that key in her hand, Jenna was ready to find out. She returned to the house alone, one final time, on a gray October morning. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone had been there before her. Someone who left behind a warning. Or maybe to trap. Jenna stood in front of the basement wall, the key clutched tightly in her hand, her breath shallow as if the very air had thickened with anticipation. The panel still looked unremarkable, just a discolored section of plaster and wood, but she now knew what it concealed, or at least thought she did. Before she could move forward, a sharp noise from upstairs made her freeze. A door had closed. Not slammed, not creaked, closed. Smooth and deliberate. She called out, "Kyle," but the house answered only with silence. Her phone was upstairs charging. She cursed under her breath and slowly ascended the stairs, trying to quiet the pounding in her chest. But the hallway was empty, the front door still locked from the inside, and the air felt untouched, still. She walked through the kitchen and found her phone right where she left it, screen dark. No messages. No calls. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. Watching. Waiting. It wasn't just paranoia. There were fresh footprints by the back door. Larger than hers and slightly smeared, as if whoever made them had hesitated before leaving. She grabbed her phone and took a photo, but when she returned 10 minutes later with a towel to lift a print, they were gone. As if the floor had healed itself, or someone had come back to wipe away the evidence. The next day, she went to the public records office, hoping to find more on the house's blueprints, maybe even an old renovation permit that would explain the hollow space behind the basement wall. The clerk, an older woman with a disinterested expression and an oversized wedding ring, frowned as she typed in the address. "That house," she said slowly. "We've had other folks inquire about it, but nothing ever shows up in the archives. It's like no one wanted that part of the property officially documented." Jenna asked who else had been there, but the woman just shrugged. "Some man. Older. Didn't leave a name." She tried to press for more, but it was clear the woman had already decided not to get involved. Back at the house, she found the key was missing.
Gone.
She tore through every drawer, every coat pocket, every bag she had brought with her. Nothing. The small brass key that had been in her hand just the night before, the one that could open the sealed wall, had vanished without a trace. Panic turned quickly into dread. Someone had been in the house. Not just before, but again. They weren't just watching. They were interfering. Trying to stop her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept checking the locks, jumping at every creak of the old beams. And just before dawn, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text message. No number. No name. Just one line. "You're not supposed to know." Jenna nearly dropped the phone. She showed Kyle the message later that day, but he barely reacted. Said it was probably a prank. Said she was letting this get inside her head. But the way he said it, too fast, too dismissive, triggered something in her gut. She began remembering little details, things she had brushed off before. Like the time Kyle had picked her up late from work, claiming he had car trouble, but there had been grease on his shirt that didn't match his own car's engine. Or the way he always changed the subject when her family came up, especially Margaret. And then there was his sudden interest in real estate, his comment, just weeks earlier, about how much land like that could be worth if someone cleared the old place out. She confronted him, casually at first, asking if he'd ever met anyone in her family, without telling her. He said no. She asked again, more pointedly, if he knew anything about Margaret. He snapped, said she was accusing him of things that didn't make sense, that maybe she needed to talk to someone. But Jenna wasn't buying it. Something was off. Kyle had a past he never talked about. She'd known that for a while, had chalked it up to family trauma. But now she wasn't so sure it wasn't connected. Her suspicions only deepened when she received a letter 2 days later. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article dated May 5, 1987, less than a month after Margaret had disappeared. The article was about a fire at a remote cabin near Lake Seneca. The details were vague, but it mentioned that a body had been recovered, burned beyond recognition, and never officially identified. Handwritten across the top of the copy was a note in red ink. Check who signed the death report. Jenna scanned the bottom of the article and saw the name of the county medical examiner. It wasn't someone she recognized until she Googled it. The name matched the father of Kyle's ex-stepbrother, a man Kyle had never talked about except once, dismissively, when mentioning how dysfunctional his other side of the family was. The coincidence was too clean. Jenna felt her throat tighten. Kyle wasn't just tangentially connected to her past. He might have been part of the cover-up. But that begged the question, why? Why would someone connected to Kyle's family be involved in a body reported near the time and place Margaret vanished? The deeper she went, the more the people around her seemed to shift. Her cousin Riley suddenly wanted to reconnect, showing up unannounced with coffee and casual concern. Jenna appreciated it at first, but when Riley brought up the idea of selling the house before things got messy, Jenna felt a flicker of alarm. Riley had never shown interest in family property before. Now, all of a sudden, she was pushing Jenna to move on, forget about Margaret, and focus on her future. Jenna was no longer sure who to trust. She started keeping everything of value, photos, the article, her notes, locked in her car, even when she slept. And just when she thought things couldn't get any stranger, she got a voicemail in the middle of the night. It was distorted, almost robotic, but one phrase came through clearly, repeated twice like a warning or a chant. It was never suicide. It was never suicide. Jenna listened to it 3 more times, each playback making her skin crawl a little more. Because the family had never said Margaret died by suicide. They had said she left, vanished, disappeared. So, who left that message, and what did they know that no one else did? Jenna hadn't yet figured out how to respond to the voicemail when her phone rang again, this time in broad daylight, while she sat parked outside the public library. It was her younger brother, Aaron, someone she hadn't spoken to in over 6 months. He lived in Denver, had kept mostly distant from the family since their mother's passing, and he had made it clear he didn't want anything to do with the weird drama surrounding Aunt Margaret. But today his voice was shaking. "Did you send me something?" he asked without a hello. "Something about Aunt Margaret?" Jenna sat upright, her pulse quickening.
No.
"Why?" Aaron hesitated, then exhaled. "I just got a letter. No return address." It had a copy of Margaret's high school ID and a photo, an old one, of her with someone I don't recognize. It was marked on the back. Said 1986. Don't trust him. Jenna felt a chill slither up her spine. "Can you send me a photo of the guy?" she asked. The picture came through a minute later, pixelated but legible. Margaret looked about 19, smiling, leaning slightly into a man with a sharp jawline and dark hair slicked back. He was older, mid-30s maybe, and wearing a military-style jacket. She didn't recognize him at first glance, but something about his expression felt oddly familiar. Jenna zoomed in, inspecting the eyes, the posture, the insignia barely visible on the jacket's lapel. Then it hit her. The jacket matched a duffel bag she had found in the attic a week ago, the one she hadn't thought much of. She had shoved it aside, assuming it belonged to her grandfather or one of his old friends. But now it seemed to belong to him, the mystery man in the photo. Jenna called Aaron back, and the two of them exchanged theories and fragmented memories, most of which contradicted each other. Aaron swore he remembered Margaret dating someone with a motorcycle, someone who never came into the house but used to wait outside at night. Jenna remembered the name Tony being whispered once during a heated conversation between her mother and grandmother, something about keeping him away from Margaret. The timelines didn't quite line up, but one thing was clear. There had been someone in Margaret's life none of them were supposed to know about. And now, decades later, someone was resurfacing that part of the story. Someone who had access to personal family items that should have been long gone or locked away. Things escalated quickly after that. Jenna returned home later that evening to find that someone had been inside again. Not just inside, through everything. Her car had been broken into, the documents she had hidden ransacked. A copy of a news article about the cabin fire was missing, along with the photo of the mysterious footprints she had taken. The only thing left was a single Polaroid placed neatly on the front seat, an image of the sealed basement wall, taken from inside the room before it had been discovered. The angle made no sense. That photo could only have been captured from the other side. The implications made Jenna sick. Someone had been in that room. Possibly living there. Possibly watching. She rushed back inside and examined the wall again. That night, she didn't wait for Kyle. She pried the panel open herself, using a crowbar she'd retrieved from the garage. The wood splintered easier than she expected, and as she pulled away the covering, stale air rushed out. Thick, old, untouched. What she found inside wasn't what she expected. Not bones. Not blood. But furniture. A mattress. A lamp.
A chair.
Dust-covered, but clearly once lived in. Someone had stayed here. For how long, she couldn't guess. But there was more. Taped to the underside of the mattress was a page torn from a diary. The ink was smudged and faded, but parts were readable. He says he'll take care of it. That no one will believe me anyway. But I saw him with the papers.
He knows about the land.
He's going to make it look like I disappeared. If anyone finds us, know I tried to leave. The note ended there, the rest of the page ripped clean off. Jenna stared at the words until her eyes blurred, heart thudding so loud she could hear it echo through the walls. The implications were terrifying. Someone had planned Margaret's disappearance. Not a crime of passion. Not a spontaneous event. A cover-up. A property scheme. A betrayal. And then came the twist that stopped Jenna cold. When she sent a scanned version of the diary page to Aaron, he recognized the handwriting. "That's Mom's," he said flatly. "I'd bet anything." Jenna's knees buckled. Their mother had died 5 years earlier from cancer. She had never spoken of any of this. Had always deflected questions about Margaret. Had insisted it was too painful to revisit. But now it looked like she knew. Maybe not everything, but certainly more than she had let on. Jenna couldn't shake the thought. Had her mother helped cover something up? Had she been manipulated too? Or worse, was she complicit in Margaret's vanishing to protect someone? Someone closer than anyone had suspected? Just as those questions started to swirl in her mind, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. This one just 4 words. It's not just her. The screen went black. The night after receiving the chilling message. It's not just her. Jenna barely slept. Her mind refused to shut off, spiraling deeper into a tangle of suspicion and dread. Every creak in the old house now sounded like a deliberate step. Every gust of wind brushing against the siding felt like someone was just outside, waiting. She kept her phone within reach, locked every window twice, and left a light on in every room, but it didn't help. Nothing eased the feeling that she was being watched. She wasn't sure if the paranoia was rooted in reality, or if the recent chain of events had finally chipped away at her rational mind. But sometime after 3 a.m., she finally drifted off into a shallow sleep, only to be awakened an hour later by the unmistakable sound of tires crunching gravel just outside her front door. She jolted upright and peered through the curtain. A black SUV was parked at the edge of the driveway, engine running, lights off. It sat there for a full 30 seconds before slowly backing out and disappearing down the street. No one knocked. No one exited the vehicle. But it was no coincidence. Jenna knew, deep in her gut, that whoever was behind the wheel wasn't just lost. They had come for her. Or, at the very least, to remind her they could. By morning, the illusion of safety had fully shattered. She left voicemails for Kyle and Aaron, trying not to sound as panicked as she felt, but neither answered. When she called Kyle's office, they said he hadn't shown up for work, that he had left early the previous afternoon and hadn't returned. Jenna's stomach dropped. Kyle was the one person she had trusted completely. And now, just like Aunt Margaret, he had vanished without explanation. She raced to his apartment, banged on his door, and eventually convinced the landlord to let her in, but the place was spotless, too spotless. His phone was still charging on the nightstand. His laptop was open, frozen on the last thing he'd been reading, an archived police report from 1987 about a car found burned near the old quarry, body inside, unidentifiable due to extensive damage. She stared at the screen, frozen. It wasn't just the case that stunned her, it was the fact that Kyle had been researching it without telling her. The report was printed out and partially marked in red. Dental records never matched. Someone had written in the margin. Was it ever Margaret in that car? Jenna sat back, throat dry. If Kyle had gone digging behind her back, had he discovered something too dangerous? Had he told the wrong person? Or worse, had someone found him? Jenna returned home in a daze, locking every door behind her. She turned off all the lights this time, closed the curtains, and sat in silence. The fear was no longer abstract. It was living, breathing, pulsing through the walls of her house. This wasn't just about uncovering a long-lost family secret.
This was about survival now.
Someone had erased Margaret in 1987 and had managed to get away with it for decades. And now they were ready to do it again. She pulled out the diary page from the sealed room and reread every line, searching for something she might have missed. That's when she noticed a faint indentation beneath the last sentence. She ran a pencil lightly across it and a partial word surfaced. Rancho. Followed by smudged letters. Rancho? A location? A person? She opened her laptop and typed it into Google, and within seconds, a result popped up. Rancho Belmar Mental Health Center, closed permanently in 1991 following internal investigation. Jenna clicked through to an archived page describing the facility's history. It had been used for decades to quietly house people deemed troubled by their families. Women, mostly. Women like Margaret. The more Jenna read, the more horrified she became. Patients were committed without court approval, held under pseudonyms, and sometimes never officially released. It had been located just 2 towns over. She had passed the abandoned property a dozen times growing up and never realized its dark history. But now she was almost certain that was where Margaret had been taken, and maybe never left. As she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a video, no text, no context, just a grainy, black and white security feed of a parking garage. The camera focused in slowly until Jenna saw someone walk across the frame, hooded, arms tense. It was Kyle. He was being followed by another figure, a man with a limp, moving fast despite his injury. Kyle turned, clearly startled, then broke into a run before the screen cut to static. Jenna clutched the phone as bile rose in her throat. They had him. They wanted her to know. Her thoughts raced. Who had sent the video? Was it a threat? A warning? A desperate cry for help?
She didn't know.
But the message was clear: stop digging, or this is what happens. And then the final blow landed. As she packed a bag to leave town for a few days, to regroup and figure out her next move, she noticed her mother's jewelry box had been moved. It wasn't just moved, it was wide open, with pieces rearranged. And inside, tucked beneath the velvet lining, was something Jenna had never seen before, a gold pendant in the shape of a key, attached to a small scrap of paper. One sentence was written on it in that same familiar handwriting: "You were never supposed to find this." Jenna stood there, trembling. Everything around her, the house, the memories, the grief, now felt like a curated lie, carefully arranged to distract her from a truth too dark to face. But it was too late to turn back now. And as she clutched the key, the room seemed to darken, as if even the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Jenna couldn't bring herself to sleep that night. The key hung from her fingers, warm from her grip, its shape both antique and oddly intricate, as if it were made for something far older than a modern lock. She sat on the edge of the couch, eyes darting around the room, listening to every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the wind brushing past the house. She replayed everything in her mind: Margaret's disappearance, the hidden room, Kyle's vanishing act, the strange video, the ominous note. It felt like she had walked into someone else's life, someone else's lie. And that key, it was the next piece. She didn't know what it opened, but it felt like it might unlock everything. In the morning, she returned to the estate. The house had been sealed off since the first day she discovered the hidden room. But she still had the spare key. The local authorities had chalked it all up to an old mystery that didn't need fresh eyes. There were no suspects, no open case. But Jenna knew better. She stepped into the foyer, holding her breath. The air felt heavier than before, like time had warped inside these walls. Dust had already settled over the furniture, as if the house was reclaiming its silence. But something felt off, different from before. She moved quickly through the house, down the hallway toward the master bedroom, and into the hidden space behind the false wall. She scanned every corner of the small, silent chamber, unsure where the key would even fit. That's when she noticed the floor. There were faint scuff marks near the back, just beneath the cabinet that had been bolted to the wall. She knelt down, pried it aside with effort, and there, buried beneath old floorboards, was a lockbox. Heavy, iron, and unmistakably antique. Her breath hitched. With trembling fingers, she slid the key into the rusted lock. It clicked with a haunting finality. Inside were several old envelopes, a faded photo album, and a cassette tape labeled only with a date, May 4th, 1987. Jenna brought everything home, her hands shaking the entire drive. She didn't own a cassette player, but she knew where to find one. The local thrift shop downtown still had a shelf full of vintage electronics. She returned home, plugged it in, inserted the tape, and hit play. Static filled the room first, then a voice, Margaret's voice. Soft, broken, like someone who hadn't spoken freely in years. They told me if I stayed quiet, they'd let me leave. They said my memory couldn't be trusted, that I imagined it all. But I know what I saw. I know who he really is. Jenna froze. The voice was crystal clear. Her aunt had recorded this herself. I thought I was protecting the family, but I see now I was only protecting him. He was always there in the background, waiting for the moment I'd fall apart so he could erase me. The audio cut for a second, then resumed with Margaret breathing heavily, like she was trying to gather the courage to finish what she started. If anything happens to me, look at the trust. Look at who set it up. He's the one who paid for Rancho Belmar. He's the one who gave them my name. Jenna sat bolt upright.
The trust.
Her father had been the executor of Margaret's estate, long after she'd gone missing. He had paid to keep the house up, year after year, even when the family assumed Margaret had died. And suddenly it all snapped into focus. Her father. The man who had spent her entire life grieving his lost sister. The man who had insisted the estate sale happen quickly, without dragging up the past. The man who had gone on a fishing trip the same week she started poking around the old house. She scrambled to her computer, opened the files from the law office. She hadn't noticed it before, but now she couldn't unsee it. The financials for the estate showed recurring wire transfers, small, carefully hidden under miscellaneous expenses, made to a long-defunct care facility. Rancho Belmar. All paid from a private fund her father had opened in 1986, just months before Margaret vanished. The betrayal hit her like a wave. Every childhood memory, every hug, every Christmas morning, now tainted by the knowledge that he had known. He had known. And he'd let her spend weeks tearing herself apart trying to uncover it. Then, as if on cue, her phone lit up. An email from an unlisted address. No subject. No text. Just an attachment. She opened it. It was a scanned image, an old photo from the 1980s. It showed her father and Margaret standing outside the family cabin, smiling at the camera. But behind them, standing half in shadow, was a man Jenna didn't recognize at first. Tall, lean, with sharp eyes and a quiet presence. She zoomed in, and her blood ran cold. It was Kyle. Younger, yes, but unmistakably him. It made no sense. Kyle was supposed to be just a friend, a coworker, a tech analyst helping her dig through encrypted files. He said he'd never known her family before this.
Said he found the case interesting.
But now, seeing him in that photo from over 30 years ago, looking exactly the same, Jenna couldn't breathe. It was impossible, illogical, and yet undeniable.
Was he part of it?
Had he been inserted into her life to manipulate her investigation from the inside? Had he ever disappeared at all? Or had he been watching her this whole time, waiting for her to reach the truth? Everything she thought she knew, every step she'd taken, now felt orchestrated. Her aunt's disappearance, the estate sale, the hidden room, even the key, it could have all been staged to lead her exactly where someone wanted her to go. And that was the moment it hit her like a punch to the gut. What if Margaret wasn't the only one who'd been locked away? Jenna stared at the photo on her screen like it might change if she blinked long enough. But no matter how many times she zoomed in or adjusted the lighting, it remained the same: her father, her aunt, and Kyle. 38 years ago. A man who should be in his 60s by now, if not older. A man who claimed to have stumbled into this mystery by accident. Her hands were shaking, and a cold sweat clung to her neck. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, she wasn't just afraid of the past, she was afraid of the present. And of the people she still thought she could trust. Her father had called 3 times that morning, and she hadn't answered. She couldn't.
Not yet.
Not until she decided whether to play along or finally confront him with the truth. But she had to move fast. The longer she waited, the more she risked letting this entire thing disappear, just like Margaret did. By evening, Jenna found herself back at her father's house, standing in the same kitchen where she used to do her homework as a teenager. Everything looked the same: stainless steel appliances, perfectly organized counters, photos on the wall of family vacations that now felt like staged performances. He walked in from the backyard, casual, smiling like he had no idea what was about to happen. But she could see it in his eyes. The flicker, the hesitation. He knew something was coming. "I found the photo," Jenna said without any preamble. Her voice didn't shake, but her heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. He didn't ask what photo. He just stopped in place, one hand still on the sliding glass door, as if deciding whether to bolt. "Where did you find it? Why is Kyle in it, Dad? And why did Margaret say you paid for Rancho Belmar?" He looked at her for a long, painful moment before exhaling through his nose. "Jenna, you're digging into things you don't understand. I understand that you lied to me. My whole life." He stepped closer, voice lowering into something cold and clipped. "I protected you, just like I tried to protect her." And there it was. The confession, not in words but in tone. The same voice he'd used years ago when warning her to stay away from certain people, certain places. The voice of control disguised as care. "You didn't protect her," Jenna said, tears rising in her throat. "You buried her. You let everyone believe she ran away or lost her mind. And now you want me to stop looking because you're scared of what I'll find next." He rubbed his jaw, clearly weighing his next move. "You've opened a door that doesn't close. You think you've been in control, but you haven't. Kyle isn't who you think he is. And neither am I." Jenna recoiled, stunned not by what he said, but by how calm he was saying it. "What does that even mean?" "It means you need to decide right now," he said, voice flat. "You walk away from this, and I make sure no one else gets hurt. You keep digging, and I can't protect you anymore. And that includes from Kyle." The ultimatum struck her like a slap across the face. He was offering her safety on the condition she abandoned the truth. But safety from what? From Kyle? From the people behind Rancho Belmar? Or from whatever her father himself was still hiding? Her breath caught. "So you're threatening me?" "I'm giving you a chance," he said, and turned his back to her like the conversation was over. She walked out without another word, shaking so violently she almost dropped her keys in the driveway. She had no idea what was real anymore. And it only got worse. When she returned to her apartment, the front door was cracked open. She hadn't left it that way. Inside, nothing looked touched, but her laptop was gone. Her bag had been dumped out on the couch. And the file folder with the trust paperwork, the cassette tape, and the original envelope from the hidden room. completely missing. Panic surged through her as she raced through every room, searching for signs of intrusion. Whoever did this had been careful. They hadn't taken anything else, just the evidence. Just the pieces that connected everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message. No number. Just text. You still have time to choose. But it's running out. She dropped to the floor, back against the wall, heart racing, breath shallow. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She thought she was closing in on the truth, but now the truth was hunting her. Every move she made felt anticipated. Every discovery stolen before she could act on it. And now, her own father had drawn a line in the sand. The real question wasn't just whether she could expose the truth, it was whether she could survive it. Jenna barely slept that night. She lay frozen beneath her sheets, staring at the ceiling as every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, sent her heart lurching. She'd locked the door, bolted the windows, even propped a chair beneath the handle like she was hiding from a monster under her bed. But the truth was worse, because the monster had a key, and it knew her name. Morning light didn't bring relief. It only made the shadows more real. Her laptop was still gone, her files stolen, and now her father had drawn a clear line. Back off, or something bad will happen. But the one thing he underestimated was how far she was willing to go. This wasn't just about her aunt anymore. It was about truth, justice, and every lie she'd been raised to accept without question. She made only one call that morning. To Kayla. She didn't tell her much, just that she needed help and couldn't explain over the phone. They agreed to meet at a diner 2 towns over, off the interstate. Neutral territory, Jenna hoped. Somewhere public, safe. She arrived early, scanned every face in the parking lot, and chose a booth in the far corner where no one could approach from behind. Kayla slid into the seat across from her 10 minutes later, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap like she was in some kind of witness protection program. But when she pulled them off, the fear in her eyes was raw, real. I got a package last night, Kayla said quietly, not even opening the menu. No return address. Inside was a USB stick and a photo of me standing in my driveway. Yesterday. Whoever sent it had been watching me. Jenna's throat tightened. What was on the drive? Kayla glanced around the diner, lowering her voice to a whisper. A list of names.
People from our town.
Politicians. Real estate investors. Even our high school principal. All connected to something called Project Willow. Jenna's pulse skipped. That was in Margaret's journal. She mentioned a Willow folder once, but I thought it was a place. Or maybe a code name. It's both, Kayla said grimly. From what I could gather, Rancho Belmar was just one piece of it. There were others, rehab centers, boarding schools, even private shelters. All under the same parent corporation. All used to funnel people away. Mostly women. Some of them were deemed unstable. Others just inconvenient. Jenna's stomach flipped. You mean disappearances? Yeah, Kayla said, her voice cracking. Some were labeled as runaways. Others were supposedly sent off for psychiatric care. But most?
Just gone.
No records. No follow-up. The blood drained from Jenna's face. This wasn't about one aunt, one hidden room, or one creepy old property. It was an entire network, carefully constructed, well-funded, and buried under layers of false identities and shell corporations. A machine that fed off silence and secrecy. And the people who asked too many questions? They were either bought off, scared off, or removed entirely.
Kayla leaned in.
It gets worse. I recognized one of the names on the list. Meredith Stanton. Jenna blinked. That's my mom's maiden name. She worked for Child Protective Services, right? I remember her name from something years ago. Margaret mentioned her once. Said she trusted her. But according to the file, Meredith wasn't just a caseworker. She was one of the liaisons who cleared transfers into Willow facilities. Jenna's hands started to tremble. That can't be right. My mom would never. I know, Kayla interrupted gently. Maybe she didn't know the whole story. Maybe she thought she was helping people. Or maybe she got in too deep and couldn't get out. Either way, she was involved. The walls of Jenna's life were caving in.
First her dad, now her mom.
The people who raised her, who told her to always tell the truth, to fight for what's right, to stand up for the voiceless. Were they just cogs in a bigger machine? Did they know the full truth? Or were they pawns like Margaret, used, silenced, and discarded? She couldn't think straight. She rushed out of the diner with Kayla right behind her, needing air, needing space. But as soon as she reached her car, her heart dropped. The passenger side door was cracked open. She hadn't left it like that. Slowly, carefully, she pulled the door the rest of the way open and found a folded note sitting on the seat. In block letters it read, "You're making a mistake. Stop now or you won't have a future to fight for." Kayla read it over her shoulder, her voice shaking. "They're watching everything." Jenna shoved the note in her pocket. "Then let them watch. Because I'm not stopping." But the note was only the beginning. That night, a breaking news alert flashed across Jenna's phone. A state representative had been arrested in connection with a decades-old abuse scandal tied to an unlicensed youth facility. Photos of the facility showed a familiar gate, weathered, rusted, and unmistakably the same as the one in Margaret's old Polaroids.
Rancho Belmar.
The news was spreading. The veil was starting to lift, but it was too fast, too neat. Something was wrong. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, either to clean up the mess or to redirect attention elsewhere. Jenna didn't believe in coincidences anymore. If someone high up was going down, it meant someone higher was sacrificing a pawn. And the real players were still in the shadows.
Her phone rang again.
Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Jenna?" It was Kyle. But this time, his voice wasn't friendly. It was distant. Cold. "I trusted you," she said. "I never asked you to. Why are you involved in this?" A pause. Then, "Because I used to believe we were saving people. Until I found out we were just making them disappear." Jenna's heart pounded. "Then help me stop it." "I can't," he said. "Not anymore. And neither can you." The line went dead. Jenna stared at the phone, mind racing, fear crashing in waves. The people she thought were on her side were compromised. The ones she loved had blood on their hands. And the deeper she dug, the closer she got to a truth that someone was willing to kill to protect. And she had just run out of time. The rain fell in sheets as Jenna pulled up to the abandoned estate on the outskirts of town, the original Rancho Belmar property, long since sold off, fenced, and hidden behind overgrown hedges. It had been marked for demolition for years, but something told her this was where it would all end. She wasn't alone anymore. A USB drive left anonymously in her mailbox that morning, wrapped in a stained manila envelope, contained damning files, signed contracts, hidden security footage, and a list of transfer orders that bore her mother's signature. But there was something else, too. A final location tag buried in the metadata. GPS coordinates that led right here. Someone wanted her to see the truth for herself, and Jenna had decided that if this was a trap, she was walking into it with her eyes wide open. The wind howled through broken windows as she stepped inside, flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other. The building smelled of rot and time, the remains of its institutional past clinging to peeling paint and rusted metal bed frames. She moved down the long corridor, her boots echoing across the moldy linoleum. It was all too quiet, until a flicker of movement in the shadows made her freeze. From the far end of the hallway, a voice called out, "You shouldn't be here, Jenna." It was Kyle. He stepped out of the darkness slowly, his face hollow, gaunt, as if he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were soaked, his hands trembling, but his eyes were steady. "You led me here," Jenna said, gripping the flashlight tighter. "Why?" "I couldn't carry it anymore," he said. "What we did, what they made us do. We thought we were cleaning up messes. We thought we were heroes. But we were just covering for them." "For who?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Who is behind this?" He stepped aside without answering, motioning toward a door at the end of the hallway. Jenna walked past him, pulse pounding, and pushed it open. Inside was a small room, musty, silent, the walls lined with crumbling file cabinets and mildew-stained folders. In the center, a single light flickered above a folding table. And sitting at that table, calm and waiting, was her father. "I warned you," he said quietly. Jenna's entire body went cold. "You're the one protecting them." "I'm the one who tried to protect you," he replied. "You don't know the damage this could cause. The people involved, judges, senators, even federal agencies. You think exposing the truth will make them fall?
No.
It will make them retaliate. Hard." Her mind raced. "So you help them cover up human trafficking, abuse, illegal experiments, just to stay safe?"
Her father sighed. "No.
"I helped them make it efficient. But I did it for the greater good." Jenna felt her knees weaken. "You helped them disappear, Margaret. She was going to blow the whole thing open. We gave her a chance to walk away. She didn't." Kyle couldn't look her in the eye. "She wasn't sent away, Jenna. She was killed." The words hit harder than a punch to the chest. Jenna stepped back, vision blurring with tears. "You murdered her?" "No," her father said. "But I signed off on the transfer that led to her death. That's the truth." Jenna fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the USB. "I have everything. Documents, proof. You're going to prison." He laughed bitterly. "No one will believe you. You'll be branded unstable, paranoid, vindictive. The media already has your name flagged. If you go public, you'll be silenced within a week, either by discrediting you or by burying you like they did Margaret." But Jenna had planned for this moment. As she held the USB in her hand, she tapped a small microphone clipped under her shirt. The entire conversation was being broadcast live, streaming on Kayla's channel through an encrypted link. Thousands were watching, recording,
commenting.
A beat of silence passed before Kyle's phone buzzed. Then Jenna's father's. Then the lights flickered. Outside, sirens screamed in the distance. "You streamed this?" her father said, suddenly pale. "You taught me how to cover a story," Jenna whispered. "But you forgot that I learned how to tell the truth." Panic erupted. Kyle backed away as her father lunged across the table, trying to grab the drive. Jenna shoved him back with everything she had, sending him crashing into the metal cabinet. Files burst into the air like feathers from a slashed pillow. Kyle darted past her into the hallway, yelling into a phone. Outside, tires screeched as unmarked vehicles pulled up, some government, others media. But just as Jenna turned to leave, a final twist hit like a gut punch. A woman stood in the doorway. Older now, her hair streaked with gray, but unmistakable. Margaret. Her voice was calm, steady. "I never died. But I had to disappear because I found something bigger than anyone imagined." Jenna staggered back. "You're alive." Margaret nodded, her eyes locked on Jenna's father. "And now they're all going to pay." Jenna's world spun. Everything she believed had just been rewritten again. Her aunt hadn't been silenced. She had been hiding, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment was now. The dust didn't settle overnight. Even after the footage went viral and major networks scrambled to confirm the truth, even after law enforcement stormed the hidden facilities tied to Rancho Belmar's shadow network, and even after arrests were made, powerful names cuffed under the blinding flashes of press cameras, Jenna couldn't feel relief. It wasn't vindication. It was a strange kind of mourning. Her entire life had been rewritten. Her memories, her relationships, the faith she once placed in institutions, all fractured by the revelations that the people she trusted most had orchestrated a decades-long cover-up that destroyed families, buried lives, and nearly broke her. In the days that followed, Jenna tried to breathe in the weightless air of justice finally served, but something always lingered, like the echo of a locked door closing behind her. Her father had been indicted on federal charges along with 3 other former Rancho Belmar executives, including a sitting senator whose influence had kept the abuse buried under layers of bureaucracy. Kyle had disappeared the night of the confrontation. His phone last pinged at a small airfield in Nevada. Whether he'd escaped or been silenced was never confirmed, though some whispered that the agency he once worked for had turned on him the moment he stopped being useful. Margaret, still alive and now very much in the public eye, gave a single press conference before vanishing once again, stating that she had unfinished work to do. Her presence had shaken the country, especially after it was revealed she had spent years collecting data and hiding survivors overseas, names and stories now coming forward in a national reckoning. Survivor testimonies flooded YouTube and TikTok, triggering mass outrage, trending hashtags like #JusticeForRanchoVictims and #HiddenInPlainSight that dominated searches and sparked real policy reform. For Jenna, the days were quieter now, though never truly still. She kept the house, but changed the locks and burned every file her father had stored in his study. She started speaking at schools, advocacy groups, podcasts, not as a journalist chasing a headline, but as someone who lived through something no one ever should. Her audience had grown, not just followers but believers. People who'd been gaslit, manipulated, ignored. They found something real in her words, something unfiltered. Still, every now and then she would receive a message, anonymous, cryptic, sometimes just a location or a name. A reminder that not everyone was behind bars. Not every secret had been unearthed. Some wounds had scabbed over, but others still bled beneath the surface. And one night, as she scrolled through an encrypted drive Margaret had mailed her weeks earlier, she stumbled across something she hadn't expected. A video clip, grainy but clear enough to recognize the figures. A girl, no older than 6, walking hand in hand with a woman through the old Rancho facility. The date stamp was decades old. The girl was Jenna, and the woman beside her wasn't her mother. Jenna sat back in stunned silence, the room spinning. Her mother had always been distant, strange in her affections, guarded with their past. But this hinted at something darker. A life before the one she remembered. A possible adoption. Or worse, a fabricated identity. The discovery cracked open an entirely new mystery she wasn't sure she had the strength to face. And yet, deep down, she knew she would. Because that was the cost of truth. It never really ended. There was always another layer, another lie hidden beneath a lifetime of false memories. As she shut her laptop and looked out the window into the fog that hugged the trees, a soft knock echoed through her home. 3 short raps, deliberate and familiar. No caller ID. No warning. Just the sound and the shadow of someone waiting beyond the glass. Jenna stood, unsure whether to reach for the door or run. And just like that, the story began again.